All right. Hello. Hello. Welcome back to Hot Girl Book Club. So sorry that we're late. That is my fault. I just finished the book like one minute ago. So um have many feelings. It's I'm still putting all the
Yes.
pieces together. But I'm so excited that Annie is joining me today because I feel
Yeah.
like you read so many like sapphic books and so many like fantasy like sci-fi books like this. There's like no one else that I wanted to discuss and read this book with. So
Yeah, when you asked me to read this with you, it's like this is the perfect book for me. I was so excited. Yes.
it's so funny because I feel like I haven't really seen it around. Like I know that it
I
just came out,
know.
but it makes me wonder if it's going to be one of those like sleeper books that I'll hear so much about in like 6 months. You mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen many other people talk about it, so we'll see.
We'll see. Maybe we're just the trendsetters.
Yeah, exactly.
What did you think? What was your like overall general thoughts?
My overall thoughts is that I really liked it. Um, I rated it 5 stars personally. Yeah.
Ooh, wow. I know you just don't throw those out. That is
I
very
know. Yeah.
good rating.
The only thing was that it could get quite slow, I
Oh,
feel.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But that was like my really big problem with it. The only like I loved, of course, the main character. She was great. She dealt with a lot of bad stuff
So
that was like
much. Yeah.
it
Like,
was hard to read at
yeah.
times. Like it was just really upsetting. But um, I loved her. I loved the sapphicness of it, of course.
Yeah.
That's always, a big thing for me. So, yeah, I thought it was super creative. And I really liked that it had those like excerpts of historical papers and like research papers
Yes.
in it. I thought
I
that was
love
super
that
cool.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That
What?
was one of my favorite elements of the book was like getting those little like mixed media almost elements in dispersed. And so
Mm-hmm.
many of them were like other stories of like myths or like dragonings that happened that I was just like such a cool extra way to like inject story and like detail and lushness into the world. It felt like actual historical fiction and not
Yeah,
fantasy, even though it was
yeah.
like about dragons. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's exactly my thoughts. It felt like this really happened. Like it really felt like that, and I think that was really well done. Um, yeah. So, well, okay. It seems like you liked it too, so that's good.
I liked it too. It
Okay.
is super fresh. I think I'm feeling like 4 stars.
Okay. Yeah.
Just because there were some parts like the pacing was weird at times, and I don't know, it just didn't quite have that like oomph that I was really expecting. But there's so much about it that I love. But there's also I felt like there was still something to be desired, and I haven't quite put my finger on it yet. But maybe talking through it, like we'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fair. I mean, it was hard. It took me a long time to read it, um, mostly because of the pacing, and I kept having to stop. Um, like at some of the really more difficult parts to read, especially when Alex's dad just like abandons them pretty much. That was really,
Yeah, I knew something
really
was
hard.
shady with him. But I never liked him. I was always suspicious. But yeah, there was that part in the story where it was like, oh, I really don't like you. This
Yeah,
is
that
very
was
bad.
just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really hard to read.
Let's see. Paige is here. Hello.
Hello.
Roro is here on your wish list. It's a good one. It's a
Yes.
good one. Mayo is here.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. I have 40 pages I didn't get through, but I just skimmed real quick and we'll go back and reread. Yes.
That's fair.
There like so much happened. Like there's not an epilogue, but the last like 3 chapters felt like an epilogue.
Yeah, yeah, it did.
I'm feeling 4 stars. Okay. Yeah, I like same. Same. Before we get into like spoilers, what did you think of like the whole premise of it and like the myth of dragoning and how it became like this taboo thing, and like what led to the mass dragoning when like what was it, like 600 or 700,000 women dragoned in one day?
Yeah, I thought it was genius. That's what I thought. I mean, the part of it being like becoming something taboo that you don't talk about, it just felt really realistic. Like that's probably like if like you were talking about, if this was a real event that happened in the 1950s, like that's probably exactly how people would have reacted to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry if you
Yeah.
can hear Sunday finally eating her breakfast in the background. This is what
Sunday.
happens. I know, she's
I love
such
her.
a goofball. But you just made me think of the dedication, which I think Paige pointed out on her Insta story recently. Yeah, for Christine Blasey Ford, whose testimony triggered this narrative, which just makes me think that it was like dragoning as being this big on the nose metaphor for like righteous fury and the Me Too movement.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I loved that it was placed in the 1950s, and personified as these like gigantic, shining, fire-breathing dragons. That's something that can't be ignored, and yet everyone pretends to ignore it anyways. Was like such an interesting lens to look at those issues through. I agree. I thought it was genius.
Yeah, it's a really strong metaphor, like especially now. So
yeah. And even the way that like, so there's like the mass dragoning that happens in 1955, but then in between some of the chapters we get like little histories or myths from different points in time of instances where we're pretty sure that this person dragoned, but in the newspaper it was like, oh, the factory just burned down, but we also know that all of the women that worked in that factory were like treated very horribly and none of their bodies were found. But no, it was just a gas leak. Yeah,
that was fascinating.
Yeah, you just start to wonder like, oh no, this is all like dragonings. But it was cool. It was like so strangely empowering, like reading about how all of these women just reach a point and they're like, you know what? Like, fuck this, I'm just burning the place down.
Yeah, respect. Yeah.
I'm excited to read it. I'm going to order it tomorrow. Yes, do it. Yes. So good. It's like I just have a smile on my face. So it's so good. Yes, the dedication. I know. I was thinking about that the whole time of like the fact that she said in the dedication, like this specifically is what inspired the whole thing of like women bursting into dragons was really, really powerful. What did you think of all of the characters, particularly all of the women and like the complexity of all the women? Yeah,
I think my favorite character was probably her aunt. I thought that her relationship with the mom, you know, her sister was really interesting. And then the fact that like they had to take in the aunt's child and then they couldn't even talk about her anymore after she dragoned. And the gaslighting in there was just so crazy. Just unbelievable. Like I felt so bad. Like I had to keep stopping while I was reading because I was like, oh God, I wouldn't have been able to take that if I was in her situation. Like, and you know, the aunt had a good reason for dragoning, but Alex still felt like very betrayed and abandoned by her. And I think that was interesting as well.
Yeah, just like the way that I felt like it felt kind of slow or the pacing was off because Alex was really given the space to process so much of her feelings with the other people in her life, the ones that dragoned and the ones that didn't, which I really liked, but it still was like, okay, what happens next? Like, but then it was like, no, like her life is so hard and she's like constantly gaslit and no one is helping her. And so I liked that she had, you know, the space and the page time to really like unpack all of that. I think one of my favorite relationships was like the complexity between Alex and her mother, because in the beginning of the book, it's like, oh, my mother disappeared and then came back like super sickly, but it was never explained. And like her relationship with her mother has a lot of like secrets and silence, and her mother never answers her questions. But then so much of the book, Alex is like reflecting on, oh, my mother taught me this, or my mother was so smart, or my mother was so brave, I just want to be like her. And it was such an interesting dynamic that like felt so real and honest.
Yeah, it felt really, really real. Like all of the character relationships, especially in that like nuclear family, it really felt very nuanced and real. Yeah.
Totally. I highlighted a bunch of amazing lines, but the dedication and the first few excerpts from Dr. Gantz were so great. Oh my gosh, Dr. Gantz. Gantz was my favorite.
Yeah, Gantz was great. Yeah, he was great.
I loved him, and I think maybe like my favorite was the old librarian.
Yeah, I loved her.
Is it Kavinsky?
Yes, that sounds right.
Kavinska or something like that.
Yeah, she was great. Yeah.
She was cool. There was almost like an element of fantasy outside of the dragons, because Alex kept saying like, how does she know that? How did she know I would be here? How did she know where I lived? How did she know how I like my coffee? It's like she just has this like random all-knowing powers of this like ancient sweet librarian. I thought was so funny.
Yeah, she was a really cool character. I want to know, what did you think about her sister / cousin who was in between dragoning most of the time?
I know, it was so interesting. And it like, even at the beginning of the book, like the way that Alex talks about her cousin Beatrice, when she's like a baby, is like with this great reverence and love, and talks about this baby like she's just something from another world, and has like all of this adoration for her. And so even when we were first introduced to this like tiny squealing baby, it's like, I wonder, like, is she gonna be a dragon? Like that was just like first what popped into my head. And then minor spoilers. Over the course of the book is like when Beatrice and Alex grow closer, and Alex has to take more and more care of Beatrice, there comes a time where you realize, oh, Beatrice is like truly like a wild child and cannot be contained by like, behave yourself, go to school, be nice to your teachers. Like she wants to be, I think she even says at one point, like, no, my skin feels too small. Like I want to do bigger things. I have to do bigger things. I don't want to do this. This isn't me. And there is this like great reckoning of, that's like, I actually like, I teared up where Alex comes to Beatrice finally and is like, look, I don't want to lose you, but I want you to be yourself, and I don't want to take that from you. Like it's okay. Whenever you're ready, it's okay. And that was like such a powerful thing. I think because we'd had so much of the book like building up to that point, and their relationship together and what they meant to each other, that felt like such a relief, but also so bittersweet.
Yeah, it definitely felt like, especially with Alex's feelings concerning her aunt leaving and everybody else like becoming dragons, and she feels like they're abandoning all the people that they're leaving behind, and all of the work that she put in basically raising her Beatrice.
Yes.
Yeah, it was very bittersweet. Yeah, very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, the whole book struggles with feelings of abandonment, like from everyone. She feels it even in the very beginning, when like she doesn't know why her mother is gone, when she's like a child, and her Aunt Marla is like running the house, and then without explanation, then her mother is back, and her aunt is kind of in and out suddenly, and then the mass dragoning happens, and then she feels abandoned again. And then more spoilers. We're probably just going to be spoilers here from here on out, just in case, just so you know. So her Aunt Marla becomes a dragon. She's like, how could you do this to me? You left your baby, and I feel you're like my favorite person, blah. And then a few years later, she like loses her mother. And then soon after that, her father is like, yo, got my secretary pregnant. Anyways, I bought you this apartment for you and your cousin to live in, even though you're only 15. It's not that hard. Your mother did it, and she had cancer, so it's not that hard. You can do it. And like kicks her out of the house, puts her in this like tiny apartment with her and Beatrice, and it's like, just figure it out. And so she feels abandoned by all of the adults in her life, and is so worried that Beatrice is going to do that to her too.
Yeah. Her father was just so evil.
So evil. Like what a piece of work.
Yeah.
And all of their phone calls and all of their interactions, I just was filled with rage.
Yeah. Really hard to read.
She finally started to get some backbone too. And even like from the very beginning, when he insists on calling her Alexandra, and every single time she's like, it's Alex, up until like years later when he like would call her at the apartment and he'd be like, Alexandra, and she would just say, it's Alex, always has been. It's just the complete blatant lack of respect.
Yeah. It was disgusting. He made me so mad. Yeah. What was I gonna say? I don't remember. What did you think about, her name was Sonia.
Sonia.
Sorry.
Sonia.
What did you think about that whole thing?
I was so here for it. I thought it was going somewhere totally different. I thought she was going to have this lovely little queer awakening, and then her dad evicted Sonia and her grandparents, never to be seen again, and then I was devastated. But it was so cute because like Alex didn't realize it. She just kept saying over and over, even after Sonia left, like, oh, it was so nice to have a friend. I just miss when I had a friend, and would see like other girls at school with their friends and realize, oh gosh, I miss having a friend, even though she like felt like the intensity and like they shared that kiss when they jumped in the leaf pile and all of that. I don't know when she actually admitted to herself until she got to college and they like had their reunion. But I love their dynamic. It just felt so easy between them, and I loved that.
Yeah, I really like that too. I kind of appreciate that the book like didn't focus on their romance, but it still kind of felt like a big part of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like it was definitely a big part of Alex's development, but like there was so much more going on in her life and in the society at the time. Yeah, it was really well done. I like that, and it was so sad. Really sad.
So sad. I know, but it just like I felt like satisfied by it, but it did break my heart.
Yeah.
I like that. You're right that it was very like I thought it was well done. It wasn't the focal point. It just was kind of casual about like she even said like while they were together in college, she said she didn't hide the fact that they were together. So if people had a problem with it, maybe they just remember that she lived in a house full of dragons. And I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, me too. I like that.
It was so frustrating that no one would explain anything to Alex. Yeah, that really got to me too.
Yes.
Even like the librarian, I'm like, just say it. Just say it.
Yeah, that was so frustrating.
We got there eventually, but it did feel like, okay, who's going to tell her? Who's going to tell her?
I mean, I get why they did that, because like you want the reader to feel Alex's emotions and her frustration.
Mm-hmm.
But it was too much frustration.
It was so much. You'll understand later. You should know what I'm talking about already. Yes, and she got a lot of this from both of her parents, even though obviously her father was horrible and her mother was like also like not a saint, but she had this still like intense like love and complicated feeling for her mother. But her mother would say things like, oh, we don't talk about that, we that's off limits, like we don't, that's a no-go. Or she would say like, you'll understand when you're older, or would just like say you're not allowed to look at that book or things like that, which I think was frustrating as the reader too, because I just want to know. But it did make it more powerful to be inside of like Alex's head that way.
Yeah. When her mother I forget when it happened. It was pretty early. But when Beatrice like drew a dragon, or she pretended to be a dragon or something, and her mother slapped Alex for it, that bothered me a lot.
Oh yeah, what was it? Was
Yeah.
like they were in the garden and she was talking about like planting the carrot seeds.
Oh
And
yeah.
Beatrice was like, "Well, those don't look like carrots." And she goes, "Well, they're going to turn into carrots because everything changes. That's how life is." And Beatrice is like, "Well, what am I going to change into? A butterfly?" And it's like this like a joke. And then she finally goes, "I'm going to be a dragon." And then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah. It was very frustrating for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I also have a question.
Yes.
Her mom would make these knot bracelets.
That's what I was just going to say.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Do you understand what that was about? Because that was the only point where I was like not quite understanding. My feeling was like it was supposed to be some form of protection, but I wasn't sure.
So we started hearing about the knots like right after the excerpt about the like sea dragons in Ireland, and how it was in this community where like knots were a big thing, and sometimes very casually these girls would like walk into the ocean and become dragons, and it was like known and accepted in the community. But like knot tying was also part of the lore and culture in that community. So then eventually men started seeking out this priest and was like, "Hey, like how can you give me a knot that will prevent this woman from changing so I can marry her?" Or whatever, like a knot for obedience, a knot for whatever. And then that little excerpt ends with the priest being like, "I'm so sorry. I should never have tampered with it," because suddenly all of those dragons, like there were no more dragons in the ocean around that village, protecting the village from pirates. So then pirates or Vikings like came and destroyed the city. And it was like the circle of life in the worst way. And there was like the final entry in the priest's diary was, "I never should have tampered with the ways of nature. I'm so sorry to the girls who belonged in the waves that I held back," or something like that, he said. And then the immediate next chapter, you don't remember this?
No, I don't. I must have totally missed
it. It was like my favorite like newspaper clipping that was in there. I thought it was so cool, but I just was like, ocean dragons? Great. Maybe that's why it's stuck in my head.
Yeah, that was like, really cool.
Immediately after that was the chapter that their mother started like tying knots around their wrists in yarn, and they would fall off, and she would ask like, "Mom, like I don't want to wear this if it's all the same to you, like what's the point?" And her mom would just say like, "Oh, don't you think it's so pretty? It's, you know, don't you think it's so pretty? You should wear it. You're wearing it, not up for debate." But they always fell off.
Yes.
And then towards the end of their mom's life, she like ties one in leather, and like that one stays and she always wears it. And I don't really know the significance of it, because she also has that book with like diagrams and like how to make certain knots that she would never let Alex read. My hypothesis is that maybe that bracelet is like what prevented Alex from dragoning, like at prom night.
Ooh, yes, yeah, because she was the only one who didn't, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, interesting. See, now that you reminded me of that, now it all makes sense. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Because that was like that little excerpt was like the priest created this knot that would prevent a woman from like hearing the call to change into a dragon. And so I'm thinking like maybe the mother even said like, "Oh, my great-great-grandmother came over from Ireland and they would make knots all the time." And it was like part of the culture. It's been passed down. So maybe I'm thinking she figured out the knot to prevent dragoning or something, because it's never really explained. Even Alex is like, "I don't know. I don't really like the bracelet, but my mom gave it to me, so I don't want to take it off."
Interesting. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Interesting.
That is my hypothesis, because I don't think that Beatrice had like a leather one. I think she just had the yarn ones that like fell off.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
I don't know. I thought that was a really cool element. Like,
yeah, it was.
It was like knot magic just thrown in there.
Yeah,
why not?
That was cool.
Yeah. Didn't read the book, but here to support. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
It was a good one. I feel like you would enjoy it. There was something else that I wanted to make sure to get your thoughts on, because there was a few things that happened where it was like, ooh, this needs to be unpacked. Dang it. This is why I always feel like I should write things down.
I know,
but then
me
I
too.
always save the book to finish until the day of book club, like a real professional. I think I did this with Notes of a Crocodile too, like a week or so ago. But
Yeah.
That's just typical.
Hmm.
Maybe it was how she kept getting in trouble with her principal for like no reason, and then Beatrice would also get in trouble, and she had to keep pretending like, oh no, my father, he just can't be here, instead of actually having to say, no, I'm her guardian because our father abandoned us and put us in an apartment by ourselves.
Yeah, and like none of them, they must have noticed that like they just didn't care.
Yeah,
you know,
I was like the really crappy thing. Like no one cared to look that closely, except for the librarian, apparently.
Yeah, but even the librarian, something did bother me there, because she like had this fortune, right, that she came into from like her ex-husband or something. I don't remember the details.
Something was never explained.
But so if she knew that Alex and Beatrice were like on their own and struggling, why didn't she just step in and like not really like a Miss Honey and Matilda situation, but like kind of like that, you know what I mean?
I thought that too. I thought that when she came over to their tiny apartment, she was going to be like, just come live with me.
Me
and
too.
Then that didn't happen. And
yes,
I thought it was kind of weird too.
And I thought she was going to offer to pay for Alex's school as well, but she didn't, right? It was just
no,
the scholarship or something. Yeah.
That did feel convenient to me, because that was like a whole stress point that she felt the whole book is like, how am I going to pay for school? How am I going to pay for school? Like my father explicitly said that he would not do that. And then when her Aunt Marla comes back as a dragon, it's like, oh, well, like, don't you have those bank statements from your mom for the accounts that you made filled with money for you when you were babies? And she's like, what are you talking about? And it just was like, poof, lots of money and a house and property a mile away from her college campus just like materialized. Felt a little convenient, but I was having a good time, so I just...
Yeah, I mean, it was great for Alex, but yeah, it did feel a little convenient and out of the blue, but oh well, yeah.
I know. And it was like kind of packaged as like, oh, well, your father never knew, because if he did, he would have taken the money, so we put it in this like secret box that your aunt specially hand carved and like put it in a secret compartment under all of these like trinkets. And it was like, all right, okay.
I guess.
I guess.
Yeah. There were some like minute things like that was like, are you sure? Okay. But it was fun.
The overall writing style, I've only read one other of Kelly Barnhill's books, which was the middle grade Girl Who Drank the Moon. Have you read that?
Me too. Yeah, I've read that.
What did you think of that one?
That one I only rated 3 stars. I was not a huge fan of it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember if I gave that one 4 or 5, but I remember I enjoyed it like similarly as this one.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I could definitely, the writing style feels identical, even though this one was adult versus middle grade. It just felt so distinctly Kelly Barnhill, I guess, even though I've only read now 2.
Yeah, the writing styles did feel similar. I guess with Girl Who Drank the Moon, like the pacing was also kind of slow in that one.
That's true.
So because it was a middle grade, I wasn't feeling it. I don't know. But her writing she definitely has quite the imagination.
Truly, it feels so whimsical. And this one in particular, When Women Were Dragons, it was like written for adults, but it had this like larger than life whimsical element to it that reminded me of The House in the Cerulean Sea, which was like, have you read that one?
Yeah.
It's like also felt like, okay, that was also written for adults, but it had this very like whimsical, magical, colorful world and colorful like lessons, and a theme of like what it's like to be othered and then take that, like reclaim that power. Like I caught myself constantly like finding similarities between those two.
Oh, that's really interesting. Now that you say that, it's not really, I don't know if there's any other examples. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but this is an adult book, but the main character is a child for most of the story, which I think is a really interesting choice. And I'm just wondering if maybe Kelly Barnhill started out thinking this might be middle grade and then changing it to adult later on when she realized that the story wouldn't really work and it had to be told for adults.
That's super interesting, because I have one of her other books, and it's a short story collection, and I'm gonna look up to see what the intended audience is, because now I'm so curious. I think this was her adult debut.
Yeah, it was.
Short stories. Yeah, okay, it's called Dreadful Young Ladies and Other Stories. Dreadful Young Ladies. Maybe this is YA. Yes. Okay, so this was published in 2018 and is like young adult fantasy sci-fi short stories. Yeah, that's all we really get. Dreadful Young Ladies, which is probably why I bought it. I was like, oh, Kelly Barnhill, short stories, fantasy, sci-fi, young women, done.
Yeah, that's very you.
But yeah, I'll be interested to read that now, having read like a middle grade and an adult, and now we'll get something in the middle, because you're so right that it feels like it was written like it could have. I could so see how it was intended or began as a middle grade and then realized like, no, I need adults to read this. Like, this needs to be read by adults through the lens of a child.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And a lot of times like that, there are other books, and I know that Britt has said this too, that she does not like reading from the point of view of a child, which is, I think, why she
said that. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's why she stays away from YA and middle grade a lot of the times, is because it's something about it just doesn't drive with her. And I, a lot of times, will find myself inclined to agree, either because the child seems to behave like an adult, or vice versa, or it just feels like weird, and I end up frustrated by it. But in this case, it just felt like we grew up with Alex, because it did span like her entire childhood, from like 4 years old to her first year in college to then like being an old woman right at the very end. And every single part just felt, I don't know, it just felt so real. Like I never felt like it was like awkward or she was at a weird age or anything.
Yeah, I agree. I think Kelly Barnhill like did a really good job of being in a child's psyche, like when things are happening around them that they don't understand. It was very well done. Yeah,
because even in the beginning, where she's like a super, super young child, she's like describing the world around her in ways that would make sense to like a 5-year-old's brain, which is probably why it didn't get to me, because if it had been a 5-year-old just speaking very logically like a normal novel would read, I would be like, this is some bullshit. Like, what 5-year-old is gonna explain like the things happening to them like this? But it just seemed like that scene where she's like a little kid and peeking in the bedroom where her Aunt Marla is like rubbing ointment on her mother's like chest, which we learn later is like, I think she had like a mastectomy or something. And she like sees them as like bite marks. She's like, oh my gosh, some monster has attacked my mother, and my aunt is like curing her or telling her she wants to turn her into a cricket and put her in her pocket forever. It just becomes like a child trying to make sense of the world around her, which felt very real for a child to do.
Yeah, that was super well done.
was not expecting the main character to be so young. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was so young for most of the book until like the last like 10%.
I was actually like, I was okay with her starting out so young, but I was expecting it to kind of span more of her life, like have her adult life instead of just ending basically at her college, you know? So that was interesting. An interesting choice.
What did you think of the ending? Like, I don't know. I want to kind of pick at that a little bit as far as like the dragonings and the studies and like the very quick whirlwind of a final chapter we got.
I think I liked the final chapter, even though it felt a little bit out of place. I liked it because I was like, it felt realistic to me, especially because she doesn't end up with Sonia.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
There's a different girl that we don't even know anything about, and she lives her life happily with her, that we don't see. I thought that was very realistic, and you know, I just, yeah, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of epilogues, so it's just my taste. But
I'm not really either. Like I just finished Get a Life Chloe Brown last night, and I was loving it, and then the epilogue was like, we so didn't need that.
oh, I
So I have like really weird feelings about epilogues too. And this one, I mean, it wasn't like an official epilogue, I guess, either, but I liked that it was there, because if we had just ended on the chapter of Sonia being like, turn into a dragon with me, and like that was the end of the book, I would have been very unsatisfied.
That's true.
So I like that we got a little bit to be like, here's what happened in the next 50 years. My sister became like some huge celebrity, like philanthropist, activist for dragons around the world. And I got married and I became an astrophysicist. And then my wife died and I built a house on the place where I saw my first dragon when I was 4 years old.
Yeah, I loved that part. I loved that. Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was a very good way to like wrap up the story without it being like super cheesy. But it also was like, I hate when books don't actually need to be like the full story. Like I want the book to be the most profound, like forming part of that person's life. And it totally was. It was like Alex's childhood, the mass dragoning, all of the people in her life leaving, some of them coming back, coming to terms with like her own queerness and identity and everything. Is like, that was the book. And then we got like a little tiny sprinkle right at the end.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I liked that she built the house where she saw that dragon and like kind of came full circle. I liked that.
I love that too. There's even that scene where Beatrice like finds that house and is like, a dragon lives here because dragons like messes. And Alex is like, what? No, they don't. There's no dragon here. And she like sees these big glowing eyes and just pretends it's a really big cat.
Yeah, I like that.
That made me giggle for sure.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that dragons, like they kept talking about dragons and taboo topics and femininity as if they were like interchangeable, because they would talk about like other taboo things, like women talking about money, women getting an education, like menstrual cycles, and dragons was like just another item on that list of things that women shouldn't talk about. And then it was like sandwiched together with like dragons crocheting and dragons holding purses and dragons cooking at a stove. And I just thought it was like so funny, but for some reason made so much sense in the context of like what she had been building up over the book.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think making it a taboo subject kind of put things in perspective, like, because Alex is female and like she has the capacity to turn into a dragon technically, and she has people in her family who turn into dragons, but she feels ashamed of it as well, and like she doesn't want to talk about it. She has like this mental block, because it's been like drummed into her by society and men that it's taboo. And like I feel like, yeah, it's just a perfect metaphor for things in real life. It's
Totally.
really good.
Yeah, I loved that moment where she like blows up at the librarian and like feels like so much guilt and shame afterwards. And the librarian is like, well, dear, she's like this old wizened lady in my head. Like, well, dear, the reason you feel guilt and shame about it is because of something called the patriarchy, which we need to talk about and get that out of your system. I was like, really, I was just cackling. That was so funny to me.
Yeah.
Like a sweet old librarian being like, we need to unpack the patriarchy, honey.
Yeah, she was cool.
Yeah, I liked her a lot. I like that she just was like omniscient, where Alex just like felt like she didn't know anything. It was a cool contrast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was a good character.
I'm trying to think of the other cool things on my list that I feel like I want to talk about. Is there anything like that comes to your mind that really stood out?
I don't know. Just one of the like funny scenes to me that sticks in my mind still is when I think wasn't it Dr. Gantz she saw by like a river or something?
Yes.
And she thinks that it's a cow. I don't know why it was so funny to me and like it stuck in my mind, but it was really funny.
Yeah, that really made me laugh too. And then she even says like, why are you researching a bird by the river? And then later when she finds him at college, he's like, didn't you think that dragons were cows? Yeah, I kind of doubted your potential that the librarian told me about. Like, oh my God. Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah, that was a good scene.
Gosh, there's another great scene that I'm trying to remember now because it like stood out as if I would turn right to it. Oh, okay. This is what I wanted to talk about. The stepmother, like being like so weird.
Oh my God.
Making her take the boxes of her mother's stuff out of the basement, put them on a sled, and drag them back to their little orphan Annie apartment.
That was so like that bothered me so much. Like I understood like the whole evil stepmother archetype thing that they were going for, but it's not Alex's and Beatrice's fault that like it's not their fault that they exist. Like why are you angry at them for existing? Like I don't know. That just bothered me so much. And yeah,
it felt a little extreme. She was like the one character where I felt like you just feel like a symbol and not a character.
Yeah, she wasn't super deep. And I mean, there was a little bit of nuance in there because like towards the end, I think she said something about the husband being on a business trip and like, okay, so he's cheating on her the same way he was cheating on their mother.
True, and then she leaves him.
Yeah. So, yeah, but she did seem like unnecessarily evil.
Yeah, she even said when they came to get the boxes, they were like, "Oh, are my like half brothers here?" And she goes, "No, like I have no intention of you ever meeting them." Like, why?
Like, why? Like that bothered me.
Yeah, that struck me as like very dramatic. Like those kids would have been like little toddlers. Like what would it have mattered? But oh well.
Yeah, she was an interesting one.
I think it was like one of those other like excerpts, like all of the news. How like because Congress like had Dr. Gantz study the dragons and then told him to stop studying dragons and like classified all of his research.
Yes, that was very interesting. Yeah, I liked how Kelly Barnhill kind of took like real life things like who was that guy? Senator McCarthy, and like his Red Scare things where he would like put people on trial for no reason, thinking they're communists. Like that, I feel like that kind of mirrored real history very well.
Oh yeah,
I liked that. Yeah,
the way, especially some of the transcripts, like with Congress, there was one super early where he was like, "Did you read my note on that paper you gave me?" And in the Congress transcripts, it's like, "Oh, you mean the note that says "You are assholes" or something like that.
Yeah,
This is the best. I could totally see this happening in Congress.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Dr. Gantz.
I thought it was hilarious how Beatrice could start to dragon and then undragon, and she'd change her eyes to freak out the little boys. Yes.
Yeah, that was funny.
That made me laugh too.
Yeah, she was a great character.
Yeah, Beatrice felt like she just felt so, like, what's the word? She just like had so much vitality. Like she felt like such a lively character.
Yeah. She was like a good mirror for Alex too, because Alex was much more reserved. Yeah,
that's so true. Like they weren't, and it even was brought up a few times that it's like Beatrice is your cousin, Beatrice is your sister, Beatrice is your child, and all of those things are true. That Alex was forced to wear all of these different hats, but Beatrice just got to always be Beatrice.
Yeah.
And so it was this really interesting dynamic because Alex didn't want her to ever suffer or think or worry or anything. So she would just take it all on of like, no, I'll take care of it. That Alex never really got to be a kid. But Beatrice got to be, have whatever childhood she wanted, so much so that she was like happy to turn into a dragon. And just felt like so expansive and free and excited. And I think that contributed to her making that choice where Alex was like, no, I have things to do and I want to do this and I'm getting an education, even though I could turn into a dragon, but I don't want to. I'm going to stick to my plans. It felt very Alex.
Yes. Yeah, it did. Yeah. I don't know. If I had the choice between going to school and getting a job or turning into a dragon.
Dragon for sure.
I'd turn into a dragon.
For sure. No hesitation.
I know. Like, who wouldn't?
God, I loved the prom scene where it's like slowly all of the girls like start to dance together.
And that was so cool.
It was so cool because it very much felt like witches dancing naked in the forest under a full moon. Yeah. But it was like the 1950s prom night. It was such a cool scene.
Yeah, I really like that. It was like just the perfect mix of creepy and magic and like powerful. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like, because there was a lot in this book that was like hard to read, but that was like maybe the most unsettling scene where it was like all of these young girls in their like high school gym on prom night were like ripping off their dresses and dancing and bursting into dragons and flying away. It was like, whoa. But I thought that was one of the coolest scenes in the book.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the most impactful scenes. Yeah, it's really good.
And just her like completely deadbeat prom date was like,
I know.
This guy, like, get away from him.
I know.
They're like walking in and seeing the dragons on top of the high school, and he's like, ugh, those things. And she's like, what, the dragons? Yeah. Oh, you don't like that word? Just like how you don't like menstruation. And he's like, la la la.
Yeah, that was funny. That was really good.
I'm like, oh, she has a backbone. Which also would come out when she'd have to talk to the principal, like on Beatrice's behalf.
Yes.
She would just like suddenly turn into this very confident young woman. I loved it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This was a really good read. I'm glad
I'm so happy that you read it with me. It was like so perfect.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you loved it so much. That's so exciting.
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to be 5 stars. I don't know. Even though I did have some issues with it, I just thought it was so unique and like had such a powerful story to tell. I really liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. It's definitely gonna like stick with me for a while, I think.
Yeah.
Because of like, 1, how unique it was, then 2, all of the like messages and like metaphors that were in there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I read it over a month ago and I still remember like all these details, and that's not normal for me. Like I forget things very quickly. So that's a good sign. Like this book definitely is memorable.
Yeah, I'm so impressed. We are such opposites. I love that it's always like the first thing you read is book club, because this happens with Found in Translation too. Me and Brittany are like, we just finished, and you're like, I read it a month ago.
Yeah, but then I don't remember anything.
There's like no in between. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Wow. Well, thank you for taking the time to read and discuss and
Yeah, of course.
hang out with me. It was like so perfect.
Yeah, it was. This was a lot of fun.
And also, thank you to everyone who read along and discussed with us in the chat. This was a blast. Next month, well, this month, we're like more than halfway through July. We're reading The Memory Librarian by Janelle Monáe. And Monique from the Roomies Digest is my co-host for August. Yeah, so we'll be discussing probably, let's be honest with myself, probably like the second Wednesday in August, generously for that one. But it's, yeah, I'm excited. We're going from historical fantasy to like futuristic surreal sci-fi. I'm very excited.
Yeah, that is very exciting. That's definitely high on my TBR. So
I know, I keep hearing it get all this buzz, so I'm very much looking forward to it. I think there's too much here I'd rather not reread, but I would definitely pick this up again just to go back through everything I highlighted. Yeah, I did highlight some really good lines too. It was a fun one to kind of like drink and absorb and like appreciate the writing that way.
Yeah.
Yay, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm so glad. This is where we leave you, I think, unless you have any final questions, comments, concerns, or poetry. Otherwise, Annie's links are in the description, and if you'd like to go follow them, wonderful.
Yeah. Please.
Like, you were like one of my first friends on BookTube, and I feel like we have like such like similar taste a lot of times. It's so great.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we could do this.
Me too. Me too. Thanks again for joining me. It was so fun.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I will see you and Found in Translation. Just want to plug that too.
Of course.
Yes. Our live show, I still don't remember. Is it on your channel? I don't know, but it should be the first Tuesday of August for Vita Nostra. Very exciting. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, if you didn't know, Annie and I also co-host another book club together with our third musketeer, Britt from Literarily Smitten. That's all translated literature. So we'll be, discussing Vita Nostra very soon.
Yes.
I think it is on my channel.
I think it might be.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Okay. All right,
we decided here in this moment.
All right.
Okay, I will see you all very soon.